Should Australia become the world's missile manufacturing powerhouse? Right now, our military depends heavily on imported weapons. But if a conflict arises and supplies from overseas are limited, what happens? Once we've used up our stockpile, how do we defend ourselves? It's obvious that Australia needs to have the ability to produce our own weapons, but what if we could not only supply our own needs, but also become an arsenal for our allies? I'm Mel Pikos, and today we're talking tactics. Australia's missile arsenal. Let's start with what we've got. The Australian Defence Force already operates a wide range of missiles. We've got Javelins, the shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon that was used extensively in Iraq and Afghanistan and became famous in the Russian-Ukrainian war. The Navy relies on Harpoon anti-ship missiles, which are in the process of being replaced by the Naval Strike Missile. The RAN also uses the evolved Sea Sparrow missile for air defence. Our Hobart-class destroyers are armed with the SM-2 and will soon field the longer-range SM-6, giving us a real reach in the skies. In 2024, Australia ordered 200 Tomahawk missiles from the USA and completed their first test firing. On land, we're introducing the NASAMS surface-to-air missile system. This system will fire the AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles and the AIM-9 Sidewinder, amongst others. And our new HIMARS, the same ones making headlines in Ukraine, are now part of Australia's arsenal. These will fire the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System, or GMLRS family of rockets, and the Precision Strike Missile. The RAF is in line to get the LRASM, the long-range anti-ship missile, capable of hitting enemy ships hundreds of kilometers away. It's hard to mention every single model of missile currently in use and those ordered for future use, but the important thing is this. Almost all of these weapons are imported, and mostly from the United States. We're buying capability, not building it, which means if a conflict breaks out and America is fighting its own battles, we can't be sure they'll have spare missiles left over for us. Current missile and ammunition production in Australia. So where are we right now when it comes to making our own missiles and ammunition? Australia has some capability, but it's pretty modest compared to where it needs to be. The backbone of our current industry is small arms ammunition production, which has long been centred on the Benalla munitions facility in Victoria. Operated by Tullis, Australia, this plant manufactures a range of ammunition for the ADF, from 5.56mm rifle rounds right through up to artillery shells and mortar bombs. It's a critical part of maintaining a sovereign munitions supply. We've seen in Ukraine just how quickly stockpiles of these basic rounds can disappear in a conflict. But when it comes to actual missiles, Australia is only just starting to dip its toe in the water. The headline initiative is the government's plan to develop a Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance, GWEO enterprise, announced in 2021. This is a partnership between defence and companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, aimed at building an end-to-end capability to produce, maintain, and even export advanced missiles onshore. The idea is that Australia should never again be entirely dependent on foreign supply chains for critical weapons. So far, progress has been slow but visible. Lockheed Martin has committed to setting up local manufacturing lines for GMLR munitions, the rockets fired by the HIMARS launchers. Raytheon is also exploring opportunities to open up facilities for naval strike missile components, which the Royal Australian Navy is introducing on its surface ships. On top of that, we already have experience in smart weapons development. Companies like Electro-Optic Systems in Canberra produced advanced weapon stations and pushing into laser and space domain systems. Other firms like Defend Techs in Melbourne are experimenting with loitering munitions, which have become a game changer on modern battlefields. The government has also flagged that Australia could become a key supplier of rocket motors and explosives, the absolute building blocks of missiles. That means scaling up chemical and energetic material plants, which is less glamorous than building a missile factory, but just as important. Without propellant and explosives, the rest Doesn't matter. So right now we've got a patchwork of facilities. Benalla for ammo, Mulwala in New South Wales for propellants, and a few high-tech companies innovating on the margins, and a lot of talk about new missile factories being set up in Queensland and South Australia. It's a start, but it's not yet an ecosystem, and compared to the scale of what the US, China, or even South Korea can churn out, we're still very much in the early prototype phase of building a sovereign missile industry. Why aren't more missiles being produced here? If the benefits are so obvious, then why isn't Australia already churning out missiles by the thousands? The reality is there are a few big hurdles. The first is scale. Missiles are complex, high-tech systems that require advanced guidance, propulsion, and warhead technologies. Producing them at meaningful quantities means setting up entire industrial ecosystems, from factories to supply chains to skilled workers. For a country like the US, which has decades of mass production experience, this is second nature. But for Australia, which hasn't historically made missiles at scale, it's a steep learning curve. Starting from scratch means huge upfront costs, and governments are often hesitant to commit billions unless they're sure the investment will actually pay off. The second challenge is intellectual property and licensing. A lot of these missiles Australia uses, like the Javelin or the Tomahawk, are designed and owned by US defense giants like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. That means Australia can't just decide to copy or build them domestically without getting permission. Even when co-production agreements are signed, there are limits on what technology does get shared. That's partially why projects like GWEO are moving slowly. They involve long negotiations with overseas partners to transfer sensitive tech. Another issue is workforce and skills. Building advanced weapons takes engineers, scientists, machinists, and technicians all trained in defense manufacturing. Right now, Australia doesn't have enough of that talent, and it competes with other sectors like mining, energy, and construction that all pay very well in Australia. Training and retaining the workforce needed for large-scale missile production will take years, if not decades. And then there's the political side. Defence projects in Australia have a habit of getting bogged down in delays, red tape, and cost blowouts. Politicians want quick results, but industry projects like missile factories require long-term bipartisan commitment. Without that consistency, companies are hesitant to invest and momentum can stall. Add to that the fact that Australia has historically preferred to buy off the shelf from allies like the US rather than make things ourselves, and you can see why local missile production hasn't yet taken off for all of those reasons. Then there's the question of demand. Until recently, the ADF didn't actually need tens of thousands of missiles. Our military has been geared towards small-scale deployments, not major conventional wars. But as global tensions rise and as lessons from Ukraine show just how quickly missiles get used up in modern conflicts, that calculus is changing. Australia's recent purchase of 200 Tomahawk missiles seems ridiculous when you remember that during the 2017 US strike on the Syrian airbase, they fired 69 Tomahawk missiles in just one volley. If we did something like that, a quarter of our stockpile would be gone just like that. And finally, the cost. Realistically, it'd be extremely expensive to pursue this sort of policy, but if the political will was there over a sustained period of time, it'd be doable. In short, the barriers are scale, licensing, workforce, politics, demand, and cost. But with the right investment and strategy, those barriers aren't insurmountable. They're just tough problems that need a real commitment to solve. Problems that Aussies can solve. What if Australia became a missile manufacturing powerhouse? Let's say Australia went all in and became not just a regional missile maker, but a genuine global supplier, what would that actually mean? First off, it would transform Australia's role in the global defence industry. Right now, the world's missile factories are clustered in just a handful of countries: the United States, Russia, China, and a few others like France and Israel. If Australia joined that list, it wouldn't just make us more self-reliant, it would make us indispensable. Imagine a world where America or European stockpiles were stretched thin, like we've seen in Ukraine. If Australia could step in and ship thousands of missiles to allies, we'd suddenly be a cornerstone of the Western Alliance network, not just a junior partner. That would mean real strategic leverage in international politics. Economically, the benefits could be huge. Defense manufacturing isn't just about building the weapons, it's about creating high-tech supply chains. Missile production requires advanced electronics, guidance systems, rocket motors, and precision engineering. Each of those industries could spill over into civilian tech fields, creating jobs and driving innovation. If we played our cards right, Australia could not only supply the ADF, but also export missiles to trusted partners. Think Japan, South Korea, India, and other NATO members. That could mean billions in exports and the birth of a new industrial sector, similar to what happened when South Korea turned itself into a major shipbuilding and arms exporter. Of course, being a missile powerhouse isn't just about making money. It would also reshape Australia's strategic posture. Instead of being seen as a country that relies on the US to protect it, we'd become a country that others rely on for their defense. That flips the script and gives Canberra much more weight in negotiations. Suddenly, Australia isn't just the deputy sheriff of the Pacific, it's a nation that can independently shape security outcomes across the Indo-Pacific. But there are also some downsides. If Australia became one of the world's major missile suppliers, it would paint a much bigger target on our backs in the event of a conflict. Countries like China might not see us just as a middle power, rather a direct contributor to their adversaries' military capabilities. That could invite cyber attacks, economic coercion, or even military threats aimed at shutting down our production. In other words, it's a path that would raise Australia's profile, but also increase the risks. Still, the bottom line is this: becoming a missile powerhouse could take Australia from being a relatively minor player in global defense to a central one. It would strengthen our alliances, boost our economy, and give us a seat at the table in shaping the Indo-Pacific balance of power. The question is, are we ready to accept the responsibilities and the risks that come with that? What do you think? Australia already buys some of the world's most advanced missiles, but unless we learn to build them ourselves, we'll always depend on others when it matters most. Becoming a missile manufacturing powerhouse isn't just about weapons, it's about sovereignty, deterrence, and influence. Do you think Australia should invest now, before it's too late? Should we be building our own missiles? Should we become the world's supplier of missiles? Let me know in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next video. That's it for today. I'm Pikos, and we've been talking tactics.